How's it going, film and TV fans? Welcome back to yet another off-the-cuff film review here on the Zodiac Enterprises YouTube channel. Today we're back in the world of Batman, looking at 1989's Batman, directed of course by Tim Burton. And I think it's a film that, you know, everyone knows this film. Everyone knows the iconic elements of it, and I think it laid the groundwork for a lot of what came after it. I still think it's a fantastic film. I actually think, personally, Keaton's my favourite Batman. Just behind Rob Pattinson, but we'll get to that much later on. I think the world this film establishes is so fantastically built, so gritty, so you feel it in the production design, the costume design, even in the sound design as well. You feel this really gritty version of Gotham that I don't think has left the Batman canon since. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it just feels like this version of Gotham that we have never kind of looked back from. And I really like this version, this design. The Tim Burton feel is obviously here in Fields, and I do love that quite a lot. I do think Michael Keaton is a fantastic Batman, like I said. I think his Bruce Wayne is interesting because it's not... I think he plays the Bruce Wayne in a way that I feel it's not quite the playboy, philanthropist kind of person that is perceived in the portrayal that Bale does or when George Clooney does it, but it's very much a quiet, subdued, yet still clearly unstable Bruce Wayne, and I really love that. I think, of course, we can't talk about this film without talking about Jack Nicholson as the Joker, and I do really love the performance. I think it's an interesting turn to see someone, dare I say, of that caliber in a film like this, but I think it's because of the film that he's in that he elevates it so much. I think the presentation and the makeup design of his particular interpretation of the Joker certainly laid some groundwork for what would go on in the future. I don't think he's the definitive performance, but I don't even need to tell you who that is because you all know exactly which person did the definitive Joker performance, and I don't think that's ever going to change. And we'll get to that much later on, but I do think he laid a really great groundwork, and he also did a lot quite well. I felt there's some sequences where he definitely is channeling Cesar Romero quite a lot, so he's a really great Joker for, you know, continuing what had been previously set up before him and very much influencing what would come after. It's a very out there performance, and I really enjoy most parts of it. I think a lot of the dialogue he is given is actually really strong, I think, and some of the sentences and the actual phrases that he says is also really strong from a script standpoint. I also think a lot of the dialogue that is given to Bruce Wayne when he is Bruce Wayne is also incredibly strong in developing him as a character, I think, and even when it's the minimalist dialogue, it still continues to build him in a way that is subtle enough that it won't go over everyone's head, but also still out there enough that most people will still see it. And I really think that's something that is missed in some of the films that are coming up, where they really just stop trying to develop either Bruce Wayne or Batman and just go fuck it, you know, balls to the wall kind of shit. But here it's grounded, it's built, it's, you know, and it's evolved in the next film, which again we'll talk about in the next video. But it's all established here: the world, the ideology, the whole ethos of Batman. And I think this specific portrayal has always been one to me that I for one love 80s movies as well. When it obviously coming out in 1989, it has, you know what, it doesn't feel like the most, like it doesn't, like when you think of an 80s movie, you think synth pops, you think bright clothes and things like that, and a pop soundtrack. And I think while there is one of those things that this movie does have in some kind of capacity, it is not on the level that most of the 80s movies have. So while it does feel, you can feel the 80s in kind of the presentation and the visuals and things like that, but it's building its own world outside of that perceived 1980s world. It's a bit like pseudo Ghostbusters, and I think it still feels the 80s, but I don't think it's like, you couldn't, if you showed this to someone in 40 years from now, they wouldn't tell you it's an 80s movie, they'd just tell you it's a really old movie. And that's the thing that I think, again, something like this and Returns certainly ground that palette in that it could really be from any time period. Whereas you get a little bit further down the line, I think, you know, the two I'm talking to, and they're very 90s, let's put it that way. But I think the real heart and soul for me of this movie is the music department. we have an incredible score by Danny Elfman, who arguably also set out that groundwork of what would define the music of Batman. I think Nelson Riddle's work in the 1966 movie is just reflective of the TV show and that kind of period of time and the very silly comedic kind of style that show and movie was going for. But here, Danny Elfman sets the groundwork of Batman as a brooding, gritty character with serious and incredibly well-constructed themes. Obviously, the Batman theme played here by Danny Elfman is one of the most iconic pieces of film music of all time. I think it is one of the best Batman themes. I think it's definitely better than the Zimmer theme, but I also have a huge soft spot for the Elliot Goldenthal theme that we'll hear in a couple of future movies. But I just think the score here is, even if you take out just that one track, the rest of the score is arguably just as iconic as it is synonymous not only now with the movie, but a whole other generation heard this music in the incredible video game that is Lego Batman and its sequel Lego Batman 2, which we do have some kind of connection to that coming up in the future reviews with Lego DC Superhero Lego Batman the movie DC Superheroes Unite, which is one that I'll be reviewing a little bit later down the line. But it's nice to see that game is clearly heavily inspired by this movie and its successor, and that it kind of laid the groundwork in that I played that game before I ever saw this movie or its successor. And I think for me that certainly has, going back to see the movie after the game, you can see the two, well, I can't say the two influence each other, but you can quite clearly see the influence that the game has taken from this specific movie, its sequel, and even to an extent the two after it, and even Batman Begins to some degree at some point. And I love that about that it really does stick in the mind of when you think of Batman. This is one of the ones. I know you can look online and see loads of stuff where people were upset that Michael Keaton got cast as Batman at the time. I think that's really funny, but all I need to do is point at Heath Ledger when everyone was getting upset that he was cast as the Joker, and then that performance happened and everyone shut the fuck up. It's a similar thing to Daniel Craig in Casino Royale, where everyone was like, oh, he's blonde, he can't be Bond, and then as soon as Casino Royale came out, everyone once again shut the fuck up, because it's just an iconic performance and he really pushed himself there. But again, that's a different thing altogether. I just think I adore the world that Burton creates in this movie. I think just even from some of the shots, there are a couple of homages to Batman 66 in the TV show where there are a few Dutch angles, but I feel like overall a lot of the shot types are designed to just kind of lure you in as much. They open it up when you see the big city shots and they allow you to see as much of Gotham as possible to help the world building, but when you're pushed in with just the characters, you see what you need to see. Nothing more, nothing less, just enough to help that build that world. There's a lot of shots where there's a shot where Bruce Wayne is stood with Vicky Vale and her friend, I can't remember his name, the other news reporter, and they're in Bruce Wayne's mansion, but the door, they're stood like a set of doors is behind him, but those doors are open so you can see into the room, but only enough for what the audience needs to take away from that to make you think, oh, he's going to go in there and change into Batman or something like that. And I really like the way that those shot types have been constructed for the movie to just actually build the world, but also open it up and close it up when needs be. I think practically, obviously, a lot of that stuff, there is obviously some visual effects, specifically towards the end in the church sequence, but a lot of it was practical. The car is really cool as well. It's a really, really iconic design for the car, and I really, really fuck with that as well. I think the movie itself is just, again, it's one of the definitive portrayals of Batman in media that has obviously been around for, it has definitely left its mark, and it's one of the portrayals that I think, again, in 40 years' time, people will still be talking about this, and they'll still be talking about The Dark Knight, and they'll still be talking about the Batman. But outside of that, Batman Returns might get a mention. The other two from the 90s, hey, listen, I love Forever, but we'll get to that eventually. I just think everyone knows how important this movie was to comic book movies and things, and it came out in the summer of '89, so it was a massive blockbuster hit, but it went up against stuff like The Last Crusade, and License to Kill, actually, funnily enough, and it did numbers, and the studio obviously gave Burton the reins to do whatever the fuck he wanted in the next movie, which, for filmmaking, he did a really great job of literally just doing exactly the most Tim Burton shtick, but the studio obviously were not too happy with it, and things went... It was an interesting movie, but we will get to that shortly enough. I think Tim Burton's Batman is a really great example of just pitch perfect creation of a world that the audience truly just doesn't forget, and I think it's just an absolutely well-crafted film with so much... It's clear that it's for the love of the characters, and I think obviously there was a lot of controversy at the time that the identity of the person who killed Batman's parents in the comics is famously not the Joker, but in the movie, to make it work a bit, well, I mean, to do what it does, Joker is revealed to be the person that kills Batman's parents at the beginning. I think it's a fine thing. It really isn't brought up hugely, but it works enough. I think it kind of makes sense for this specific version, which is why I'm glad they didn't go along that route in Begins or even into The Dark Knight. Obviously in Begins there's a whole thing where it's properly built into Joe Chill and all that stuff, and I could not see Heath Ledger's Joker killing his parents. It just doesn't make any sense. Heath Ledger's Joker just needs to come out of nowhere like he does, and I don't think it's a big issue here. I know a lot of people made a stink and a fuss about it, but I don't think it's that big of an issue. I just think it doesn't really affect the movie, and I think the film is just fantastic. Briefly going to touch on, I mentioned it, well, I kind of alluded to it, the pop soundtrack here. It's not a pop soundtrack because it's Prince, and Prince is just in a fucking league of his own, we all know that. And the Prince songs are fantastic. My favourite one, personally, is Party Man. I love that song. And the songs are great, and it's really, I think Prince was a really interesting choice. I really liked it. I think in the parts of the movie that the songs appear, they work really well. They're not just randomly overlaid into a scene because we need a pop soundtrack to sell a cassette or a CD. They're placed in a way that's meant to help the story, and I really, really appreciate that. And I think it takes a musician like Prince is not going to easily decide that he was happy to have his music be background, but I think, having obviously seen the context of the film, he seemed to be okay with it, and it seemed to work really well. And I just appreciate that while this is the first kind of foray into pop music for Batman, and it would appear again in Batman Returns with a single song, but it would then fully go pop soundtrack in Forever and Batman and Robin, and then it would literally never ever surface again because there is no reason for any kind of pop soundtrack in like The Dark Knight. That would be fucking weird. But I think it's very interesting that it kind of balances itself out in that regard, and I think it's just layered so perfectly into the film that I can't really fault the track placement and the actual context of the songs. They really, a lot of it I think is inspired by some of the Joker's dialogue, but I also think there are some of Batman's moments that the songs are inspired by as well. Overall, it's just a really fantastic portrayal of the character. It's obviously something that would again go on to, you know, lay the groundwork for what so many filmmakers would do in the future, and I think there's a heavy emphasis on the style that this movie had in, specifically I think in The Batman, is the one that I think didn't try to steal it, but definitely is most inspired by this movie. I think The Dark Knight and Batman Begins are their own kind of very 2000s thing, while still being quite true to the characterization, whereas I do think you can easily, you know, attach this movie and The Batman as in having the same kind of attempts to ground Batman in real world. I think there's a little bit more silliness here than in The Batman, but I think that silliness is solely from Jack Nicholson's character and there really isn't much else to it. But thank you so much for watching or listening, because we're back in podcast form again. So go listen to that if you get a chance on Spotify for podcast. Thank you for watching or listening. I hope you have enjoyed this review. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll catch you in the next review, Batman Returns, very, very shortly. Thanks so much for watching, and bye-bye for now.